The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
What's up, Downers? Welcome back to another episode of your all-time least favorite show, The System is Down. I've heard a lot of podcast gurus say that most podcasts don't ever make it to the 7th episode, but we did it. Here we are. Episode 7. To celebrate, I had the largest group that I've ever had on the show, 5, including myself, to talk about our most anticipated topic, what was the tipping point for many people from the generally accepted perceivable world over into the crazy conspiracy matrix. 9/11. Now, we don't want to make light of any tragedies or deaths that occurred, but I personally believe that it's more disrespectful to the people who lost their lives for us to not question the evidence and try to find reasons behind these things and why much of the story doesn't add up. So we talked for about 2.5 hours on this, and I think barely even touched the surface of it. So this episode is just the first half of the first of what will inevitably be many discussions on this topic to come. Keaton was on once again, and once again his Skype audio got cut. I can only assume it was by the CIA, so there may be a few oddly edited spots where I had to kind of smooth that out. And in case you're wondering if this is going to be just a bunch of crazy people agreeing with each other on crazy things, fear not. I had Nathan join us, and he brought the Devil's Advocate research to stand more on the official story side and bring a little balance to our madness. So that was actually very much appreciated. And Nathan and I have a lot of history together, so if it sounds like I'm being a douchebag, I assure you, it's all out of love. So, blah, blah, blah. Happy episode 7, everyone. Let's get weird. On today's episode, we're talking about something very special to everybody's heart. Let me preface by saying, when I started this group, I started this podcast, I started the group first on Facebook forum, and I started it to discuss things like conspiracies, politics, and religion, and I assumed we'd have a bunch of people talking about politics and religion, but it seems like everybody just wants to talk about conspiracies. And to prove my point further, we've had 5 episodes before we're recording this one. Not sure when this is coming out, but of the 5 episodes we put out, the Mandela Effect was second, and all the others have about half the amount of view or listens as the Mandela Effect. So apparently, people are demanding something, and it is craziness. I've been trying to kind of avoid it, trying to not push people away too quickly, but I've come to the conclusion that that's what the people want, and we will give the people what they want. So on that note, I say, fuck it, let's talk about 9/11.
Weird.
Can you say that on your own podcast?
Yep.
He censors himself on it.
I do. With me today, I have the biggest group of crazy guys, and maybe some that are less crazy than others that will hopefully rein it in a little bit. But today I've got Nathan Sipes, who was with us on the first episode, Craig, who just keeps coming back no matter how much I try to stop him, Keaton Johnson, who is on, I think, episode 3, and a newcomer who may or may not chime in here, Brad Moran.
Woo.
Brad, how are you doing?
I'm getting there.
Get up on the mic.
Get him on the mic here.
Hello.
But yeah,
Can we
Brad
get an introduction to Brad?
Yeah.
A little.
This is not
backstory
church. We're not going to be like, hey,
it's
tell
all
us your
good.
story.
I guess how
Hi, Brad.
how I relate to 9/11. I was in 6th grade when it happened. Was feeling pretty patriotic about it. God bless the USA. And then you kind of look into it more and you see all the fucked up shit that's happened. And you start to question everything from the top down. And now with the president the way he is, it's like, who knows? Maybe it is messed up from the top.
Well, Brad, you've come to the right place.
Yeah, exactly.
Attitude like that.
Welcome.
The problem with this topic is we try to make these episodes an hour long, and you can talk for an hour about the first plane taking off, basically, and never scratch the surface of this topic. So this is probably, let's talk about 9/11, episode 1. So where do you guys want to start?
Would you guys like to start with a little backstory?
September 11th.
I believe it all actually.
You could probably got to start with like September 10th at
I
least.
believe it actually all begins in
Yeah.
1979.
We could actually have an entire. We could actually have an entire episode just on like 2 days leading up to 9/11, like the 2 days before 9/11. We could probably record a whole hour talking about that.
Yeah,
not
but-
even touching the actual story.
Sure.
But I think we'd be doing ourselves a bit of a disservice if we didn't start in 1979.
1979.
Actually, we could go a little bit earlier than that. We could go back to 1970.
Let's kick it off.
Picture this. The universe is a dark and void place. And then,
You're going to say that the
14
world
Big
was formed in
Bang.
1979?
yeah, so, okay, just to make things clear, I'm arguing Brad, could you please keep your cans
I always
under
leave
wrap?
the beer sounds in the background in. I don't edit those out because I think it adds to the flavor.
So,
It's class.
yeah, so just to make things clear, I'm arguing a point that I don't necessarily hold to, but because I find it to be more interesting, I'm going to argue in the Patriots' perspective, so to speak. So that's the research I did was basically saying the story is exactly as the government taught it or told it to us, and I'm going to try to argue that point as much as possible.
Perfect. I love a devil's advocate.
Yeah,
no matter
that's
how crazy
exactly what I'm doing. So yeah, I guess what I would point to first as being like kind of the most important relative component that goes back as far as possible would be the Watergate scandal. And this seems irrelevant, but it does play into it in the facet that the Watergate scandal laid out a bunch of judicial issues that led to information sharing kind of legislation. So we'll get to how that plays a little bit later, but then
1 hour into Nathan's rant.
so bear with me for an hour. Thanks guys for coming, but I'll take it from here.
Got 5 guys on here to listen to Nathan talk.
And, yeah, basically in
can listen to your voice all
1979
night,
we have the Soviets invading Saudi Arabia, and I believe, if I'm not getting my facts incorrect, I believe that's kind of what began the kind of Al-Qaeda opposition, and then continuing on, the United States kind of backed certain, I guess, enemies of Saudi Arabia, and they had occupation there. A lot of things added up to making certain leaders of Al-Qaeda very upset with the foreign policy in the United States. So there were a lot of motivations leading up to the point where, and actually Osama bin Laden had gone on record saying that he came up with this idea. I believe it was around 1982, somewhere in that range. There was a certain bombing that collapsed towers in Saudi Arabia, and or Lebanon, something like that. I have my facts very clear in my head, but he was inspired by some attack that happened in his country where he was at that time that made him think, oh, we should attack towers in America. And so he had been brewing on this for a while, and he finally got to the point in 2001 where he was saying we need to make this happen sooner than later. And there were actually going to be more extensive attacks, but he said we just need to make this happen. And he basically said, you guys choose your targets. Let's just make it happen. So that's a little bit of the backstory from just kind of the political science and history of the, I guess, conflict.
See, that's a good place to start, like 1979, because I think sometimes we've got to go back in time to see, especially what our government was involved in order to see the things that are playing out right in front of us. I would only debate with you to go back a little farther than 1979, as crazy as that sounds, because in 1962 or 63, and this is CIA non-classified, it's unclassified document. It's you can Google it even. I mean, not that we trust everything we see on Google. They had a Project Northwoods. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Project Northwoods.
Yep.
Was actually in the early 60s. Obviously, there was a lot of strife, a lot of turmoil still with Cuba. We were going through the Cuban just garbage, and there was actually an unclassified document that the United States military, more so the CIA than the United States military, was going to actually they were actually going to put on a false attack on American soil and blame it on the Cubans for us to go to war to Cuba. And this is actually like documented information. And this isn't the only time we thought about doing that. We also thought about, to get a little bit crazier, we were going to use technology to make it appear to the Cubans that Jesus had returned, which would cause them to all be in chaos while we attacked them. This is true. Like, this is the the blue beam side of it, so that's a little bit crazier and further down that rabbit hole, I guess, than some people want to go. But the unclassified document clearly states that we were going to paint Cuban colors onto an airplane, and we were going to attack American soil with it in order to convince our people that it was a good idea to go to war with Cuba.
Right.
And then again, I believe we did similar things with the I forget the name of it, but the crisis where we said it was similar with Vietnam. We were going to do something similar with Vietnam, and we ended up not doing that.
Vietnam was the Gulf of Tonkin, and that actually happened. Our ships were attacked, and they blamed. Well, basically, what happened was the South were sending raids in. Was this Vietnam or Korea? I can't even remember which one this was.
I think it was Vietnam.
Let me preface all of this. I meant to at the beginning, but let me preface this by saying none of us know anything that we're talking about. None of us are hardcore military strategists. None of us are experts on demolition. I don't even know the word for demolition experts, but don't take this for anything other than these are what we've found and the little bit that we've been able to remember over the years, and we're just regurgitating in the truest sense of the word, puking it back out, and whatever comes out is what it is. And feel free to fact check us and call us out.
It was. I still have my notes from the episode that we didn't end up airing about similar false flags and stuff like that. So it was the Gulf of Tonkin. I pulled up my notes. Basically, what was happening was the South Vietnamese were sending raids onto the coast. At the same time, we coincidentally would have a battleship patrolling through the Gulf, and so making it look like we weren't actually sending raids, but to the North Vietnamese, it looked like we were sending in the raids because coincidentally, every time our ship would go through, the North would raid or the South Vietnamese would raid the Gulf. That way, that kind of forced their hand to send torpedo boats after our ship to keep us from attacking them. So we weren't actually attacking them, but we made it look like we were. And then there was the second attack that actually never actually happened. We blamed it on phantom ships now. If you actually go back through
That's
the
one I was
memos and stuff
referring
like that, the phantom ships that they saw on their radar, so we thought we were being attacked. So we decided to go to war with them over phantom ships. But to get into your plane thing with Cuba, there was a similar plan where the CIA was going to take. It was supposed to look like a really publicized college trip where they were going to put CIA members who looked like college students on a plane, fly it over to an island, land it, get the people off, have a remote plane fly over Cuba, and have it look like Cuba shot those college students down to also draw us into war with Cuba. So the plane story kind of holds true even back multiple times, apparently, back in the 60s.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take it back
and I
even
think that would
further, actually.
Dear God, let's get to 9/11 at some point.
Let's take it back even further. World War II, Pearl Harbor, a lot of people jumped on that, saying, that was actually, a domestic attack that was made to look like the Japanese attacks that we'd get involved. So, I mean, I think we could keep going back, even, I guess, the Boston Tea Party, they made it look like it was somebody else. So
Jesus dying on the cross.
Yeah. So,
they staged Jesus dying on the cross to look like...
I mean, Adam and Eve, the snake. Eve actually was the snake.
Yeah, there you go. What do you think would be a good local starting point, Craig, for a few days before some of the anomalies that took place?
I'd go back a couple of years. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of PNAC.
Yes.
Well, of course.
The Project for the New American Century.
No.
Yes, I
I'm
have.
familiar with the term, but not so.
I'm sure Daniel has. PNAC was the Project for the New American Century. It was basically a think tank of neoconservatives who all got together and decided how America was going to be pushed into this global leadership, global military and economic leadership, basically supporting a Reaganite policy of military strength, building up the military all around the world. Basically, what you're seeing now was decided during this PNAC think tank back in early 2000. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was formed in the late 90s, like 96 or 97 or something like that. But it was made up of neoconservatives. Some people you may or may not have heard of were Dick Cheney was one.
No way.
Jeb Bush was one. Yeah.
Not Jeb.
Yeah, definitely Jeb.
Please clap.
Who was the Paul Wolfowitz was one. At least 7 of this 30-person panel ended up on George Bush's cabinet or in high positions in his presidency in the White House. And so, yeah, one of their actual statements that is highly criticized now is that in order for us to build up our military in the Middle East and all over the world, we'd have to have a modern day Pearl Harbor. And this was their statement in probably 99. And then fast forward 3 years, 9/11 happens. We do exactly what the neoconservatives wanted in this think tank. We build up the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now we have this massive military power, and it is exactly what they had decided on 3 years prior to 9/11.
Let's fast forward through space and time to 9/11 as we talk about 9/11.
The 9/11.
Yes. CNN and Time Magazine reported on September 10th a military plan to attack Afghanistan had been placed on George Bush's desk to be signed by him upon his return from Florida. They were planning on attacking Afghanistan. That is not hearsay. They were planning on it. The day before, they signed, or they put that on his desk for him to sign, and then all of a sudden, this goes down. Which, given all of these previous incidents and everything, it seems suspicious, even if you believe every single... We can start from the ground on 9/11, from ground zero on 9/11, and say, at the very least, they did do that. Now, let's go forward.
What was the preface to it? Is there any sort of preface to the war? Did they have reasoning for it? Was it because supposedly they suspected a terrorist attack was going to happen? What led to them, besides the conspiratorial, hey, we want to go to war? What was their reasoning for putting this bill on the table?
I don't know.
So I have nothing to say to this.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. That concludes our podcast.
And then they attacked the towers. The end.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys were...
They just wanted to get a head start on things.
Yeah, Brad, did you know about the trading that occurred a few days before?
The insurance scandal,
Yeah,
or
yes.
putting the puts in. I don't know much about it. I mean,
Okay.
just from the loose change documentary. you
Yeah.
know.
Good.
And I'm kind of the same way. I've looked so in depth into this stuff in the past, and then since I've said, let's do this, I haven't as much time as I did in the past to look into it, and my brain doesn't retain anything other than the basics of thermite and what I write down and that type of thing.
You've just got a notepad, and you've got thermite and question mark, and it's circled 3 times.
Thermite! Thermite!
And then...
Explosions?
Yes.
Micro termite? I can't read my handwriting.
That's actually, microtermite. That's a pretty accurate description. Yeah, so essentially, just to cover our bases there, the days leading up to September 11, there were a handful of kind of irregular trading patterns and life policy takeouts and stuff like that. The official story is that they have been looked into, and they can all be explained. Nothing crazy irregular happened. It just is coincidental. But the conspiratorial mindset would say this was an indication that there was some prior knowledge.
When I was looking into that part, I don't know the exact facts, but they were saying for United Airlines, there was a bunch of insider trading that was noted, and they went back 10 years researching the trading in United Airlines, and they found about 33 incidences of insider trading in 10 years, and 13 incidences were on September 10th. So that just seems a really big coincidence for 13 out of 33 in 10 years to be on that one day or a couple days leading up to 9/11.
Yeah, one of the official explanations of some of the trading was that one of the major investment portfolio firms sent out a fax. Yeah, this is back in the day when faxes were the way to communicate, and they sent out a fax saying that giving advice that their investors should make trades accordingly, and so that would account for the irregular volume. That would be one explanation for one of the trades. Another was evidently traced down to one particular individual who happened to make a large volume of trades.
Well, there's also September 10th. What is that? The Pentagon let out an official statement that they just lost how much
Like
money?
$3
did they say that
trillion.
they just lost? $3
It's like-
trillion dollars.
yeah.
Just it's gone. We just don't have it anymore, guys.
Don't you just hate
Sorry. We just lost it. I hate that. I lost $300 one time, and I was really mad at myself. But,
Which, given the government,
I lost a 20 once, and I was pissed.
which given the
Well,
government,
and
it wouldn't be
so-
that surprising if there wasn't a
No.
giant conspiracy after
That's
that.
not really a conspiracy. That's just the fact that our government sucks.
well, there's that. But what would be like? I mean, if you think about it, like the prior 10 years of the 9/11, there was nothing but what conflict with us in the Middle East in general, and we kind of talked about that a little bit. We prefaced that with what Gulf War, Desert Storm, all the stuff, we had been at conflict off and on all throughout the 90s with this Middle Eastern power, and then why wouldn't it be this Middle Eastern power got sick of us and just attacked us? Why wouldn't that be the case to cover up maybe what they were doing? I mean, maybe that's a stretch as a conspiracy, even if 9/11 wasn't centrally based. Hey, let's just go to war with Afghanistan. I mean, at least someone could look at it and say maybe they were trying to draw our attention from something else. I mean, it seems like a major draw of our attention. You know what I mean? That's kind of a big deal, but gosh, it got everyone's attention for months, for years,
Yeah.
and even still, every September, they can do whatever they want on September in that first 2 weeks of September, and no one will even notice it.
Yeah,
No one will
it's-
even. I mean, people. What is it now? Kids that are in high school look back at 9/11 as a before their time historic event.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And,
oh my gosh.
And we were all basically, we're all in the same general age group. We could I don't want to get into it too deep, but we could kind of recap where we were at the time, because this is something that we witnessed, and for future people, future generations and stuff like that, even current generations, like you said, this is a history thing. And there's never been a time in history, any of these events, where things have been documented so personally and been able to be shared so out in the open as they are now. Like, nobody was tweeting out pictures of 9/11 happening. Nobody was putting up YouTube videos right after it happened, because
AOL was the big thing.
yeah.
Faxing,
Yep.
Yeah,
Like-
MSN
Well,
messaging.
mass communication, instant communication.
yeah.
Well, yeah, mass communication was a thing, but it was in its primitive, very, very still fetal form. You know what I mean? Like now, people put it on Facebook every time they scratch their ass.
Yeah.
But like back then, there wasn't that kind of like, I can tell everyone anything I want, or I can put up any opinion I want. It was all just whatever the mainstream media was giving us was still the only thing there really was, unless you read a book. But who reads
Or
books?
go to the deep
I
web,
guess.
find
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was a lot
Oh, yeah.
easier to discredit
Yeah.
people as crazy, because you couldn't just type in 9/11 conspiracy on Google and find massive amounts of information.
So yeah, Brad
Well,
and
and
I can actually
we were in the
shorten
same
up.
class.
Yeah, we were together. We were in band in a basement.
They were the deep
Oh,
webbers.
we were the safest place in
Yeah,
the junior high, actually,
exactly.
if we were to get attacked.
Yeah, and what I found ironic about it is I believe that in that moment, if my memory serves, what my first thought is that's really ironic, because last night on cable or satellite, I was watching a documentary about like an earlier, I think 1989 van bombing attack on the World Trade Center.
That is very ironic.
Yeah,
You might need to be
it was
questioning
pertinent.
that.
Yeah. Then Keaton, what about
Well-
you? What do you remember from that?
Oh gosh, well, see, my whole perspective might be a little bit different from yours, because I was in school in Chicago, and that was a big deal in Chicago.
wow.
They were looking at a lot of different options at my school. It's like they evacuated our school. We were all sent home, stuff like that. It was a scary deal, because I mean, like I said, they remember they had us roll in TVs on a cart. Right, they didn't have TVs in classrooms
us
like,
too. Oh, yeah.
like they do now.
We got the cards.
They rolled in the TV on the cart, and it magically had cable, and so they turned it on. And I remember,
90s magic.
That's a conspiracy in
remember-
itself.
yeah, I remember just seeing a building, and I guess I didn't really know much about the building. Like, I don't have cable. First of all, just step back to that. I don't even have cable that well in my apartment, but these classrooms have the best cable.
I install TVs professionally for my job, and some people are still struggling to get cable.
There's conspiracy behind ATV carts and their cable access.
So we need to look into that. Add that on the dossier.
Black magic, it's the devil, and it's like we should just tell Alex Jones because he'd have a friggin' coronary. Good God. No, so like, I remember seeing the towers in New York and like smoke coming out of one of them. And like, there's been a terrorist attack, and it came over the loudspeaker at our school, and that our parents have all been notified, and they're on their way to get us. And it was terrifying. I guess, gosh, I don't even remember what grade I was in. I had them in like first or second grade. I'm 26, so how long ago was this? Goodness gracious, like, it was terrifying as a young mind seeing that. And then instantly there was speculation over the next couple days about, oh, it's terrorist attack. Oh, we're not safe. Another attack could happen. Because then they talked about the Pentagon. They talked about this other plane that crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. And then I remember being at home. I think I was either at home or I was still in the car, and it was either on the radio or on the TV, seeing the second tower, hearing that the second tower got hit. And it was like, this can't be real. Like, it was too much for my little brain.
And no one talked about Building 7.
Not until 5 p.m.
Oh, not until 12 years ago.
I didn't even hear about Building 7 until I was 20 years old. So
I didn't hear about it until like 6 months ago.
To be honest, it's not as glamorous.
That's the thing. It's not as glamorous. It doesn't strike fear into the hearts of people, so you're not going to hear about this mysterious building collapsing.
Was it like a backup plan for the government? Like, hey, if this doesn't work, we got Building 7 to show?
Yeah. Okay,
Well,
so
we should
before we get
probably-
into that, let's have Dan and then Craig share their story.
Okay, I would have been, I think, in 8th grade or freshman in high school. One of the two. But yeah, I got the classic ATV cart roll in. I was in some sort of social studies class and wheeling the ATV cart, and it was like, I mean, we weren't in Chicago, so there wasn't like panic, there wasn't fear. For me, it was like, I don't understand the world. I don't understand how this impacts the world. I don't understand how this impacts me. I know that there's been stuff like this that has happened in the past, and from what I've witnessed, it's never impacted me. So how does this impact me? This is across the country. This is a distant thing. Whatever. Okay, that happened. Let's go about our day. With my brain where it was then, and me sitting in the desk where I was, could not even remotely perceive the impact and the implications of this massive attack, whether it is a terrorist attack or otherwise. Phenomenally larger than anything I could have perceived at the time. So it didn't even really stir me that much. It's just like, oh, something else is happening in the world, basically. Yeah. I always remember the date that POD's album Satellite came out because it was on
and we were
September
supposed to go
11th,
see Skillet that night.
2001. Speaking of the last episode about crappy Christian music, we were supposed to go see Skillet that night, and that got canceled. So I remember this
No,
day.
they had already canceled it. That's a conspiracy in itself that they canceled it.
Skillet knew
2 days ahead of time.
This goes deeper than you can imagine. Craig, why don't you fill us in on the elder perspective?
All right, I was a sophomore. I was in Mr. Archer's current events class.
Ooh.
Ironically, yeah. And the next door social studies teacher came in the room and was like, "Turn on the TV. The World Trade Center just got hit by an airplane." And so I'm thinking in my head, some like idiot in a little prop plane flying around in New York bumped into the building. I'm like, okay, whatever. Turn on the TV and there's just billows of smoke coming out. I'm like, that's a little more than just a prop plane. But still, it was just... So I started watching literally probably seconds after the first plane supposedly hit.
I think that's where I was too when I started watching. I'm pretty sure I saw the second tower.
I actually saw the second tower hit it. Well, I saw the explosion out the other side. I couldn't see the plane. At least I wasn't paying enough attention to see the plane. But I saw live TV, the explosion out the other side that they show on video. And I heard the news reporter say, "Oh, there's been an explosion on the other tower." I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Watching that was the point where it was obvious that this is more than just idiots flying planes.
It wasn't like Harrison Ford trying to pilot a plane.
Yeah, I think so. I watched for that entire hour, and I saw live TV both towers fall down. I remember hearing they didn't have a feed on the Pentagon, obviously, because there was only one video that caught that. But I heard that something hit the Pentagon. They said they thought it was a helicopter at the time. At that point, obviously, I just had an impending doom feeling in my stomach. Like, there's bad stuff happening right now, and nobody's safe. So I went through that entire hour, and for the rest of that semester in current events class, all we did was watch the news, talking about the war and all that stuff. So that just turned into our current events class except my TV wasn't on a rolly cart, it was mounted to the wall. So not nearly as magical.
Ooh, fancy high school.
It was still a CRT,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I know. The high school had much better equipment than the junior high, apparently. I do remember, I remember seeing the first tower fall and watching live video feed, and the reporter's like, there seems to have been an explosion, another explosion. I'm just like, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? Because that tower just completely caved in on itself. That's not just a little explosion. Like, the thing just disappeared, vanished, and I don't know what you're looking at, but you think there's just an explosion.
Spoiler alert.
So, I just watched one called 9/11, 10 Years of Deception, and it's about the Toronto hearings. I don't know if you've heard of them. Basically, some smart people in Canada where they really they're not as ingrained into it as we are, even though they did help out in the wars in Afghanistan and stuff. But a bunch of college professors and engineers and people and scientists got together to disprove the original story.
Yeah.
They went through it with the scientific method, and basically the official story was just obliterated based on the scientific method. And so then they walked through the explosion demolition theory, and it pretty much lined up. Oh. And some people say, oh, well, there's nobody to counter-claim anything they were saying. They were all on the same side. But still, everything they were saying this is like a two-part series. It's probably total 3 hours, but yeah, it's called 10 Years of Deception. And that basically threw the whole theory about the pancake theory out, about the towers falling on themselves out. Yeah. It just got rid of all of them. And the couple old guys, he's a crusty Italian college professor, he pretty much said that the U.S. government needs to reopen this investigation, and if they refuse to, basically crimes against humanity should be brought against our government. So,
yeah, for me, the one that I recently started, and I'm about 28 minutes in, and took a bunch of notes on, and that's how far you can get without coming to conclusions, is September 11th, the new Pearl Harbor, and it was written by another Italian guy. And you say, I know you're joking, Brad, but you say, what do they care? They're in another country. But it seems like people outside of the country care a lot more than our people do. And I think a lot of that is because of the fear that we have toward this. Like, if this is true, then the implications of that are huge. Like, people outside of this country, his documentaries have been broadcast on public TV and stuff like that because they're like, well, we want the truth about this. If it happened to them, it might be a different story. But yeah. I think that it's way scarier for us to think this happened to us, and we would rather not talk about it.
Well, the U.S. is a global player for sure. Like, we obviously play a big role in capitalism in the U.S. I mean, cash is king, and if there's money to be made from something, like, they're going to do whatever it takes to make money.
The majority of the early conspiracy theories actually took foot in European nations, so it's interesting the interest that they took in it. Okay, so let's...
Well, so many of their people were being pushed into a war that we based around September 11th.
Yeah.
So if foreign countries, their citizens, have an issue with the war, they're probably going to look more subjectively at it versus people like us, where it's a personal issue to us, where we're not going to look so subjectively. We're just going to see, oh, this really hurt us, and we're going to go get the people that did it. It didn't happen to them, so it's like, well, what really happened? Why are we really sending people to fight other countries for another country?
Let's throw some facts and things into that, kind of like laying out some of the details, at least from kind of like a some of the official story and then like dealing with them as we go. First off, I'm just gonna talk about the backgrounds and motivations, and then we'll move into like the timeline and kind of break that down. So in 2002, Osama bin Laden gave essentially a letter outlining some of his objections in kind of his conditions, what he wanted the U.S. to do, and kind of saying like, hey, we caused this. This is what we want you to do as a result. The things he listed as his complaints were the occupation of Saudi Arabia by U.S. troops after the Gulf War, and he had objections to U.S. foreign policy with respect to Israel. He was upset about the support for the attacks against Muslims in Somalia, support of the Philippines' attacks against Muslims in the Moro conflict, support of Israel in aggression against Muslims in Lebanon, support of Russian atrocities against Muslims in Chechnya, pro-American governments in the Middle East who act as agents against Muslim interests, support of Indian oppression against Muslims in Kashmir, and sanctions against Iraq. And ultimately, he felt that Americans were too near to Mecca, and he considered this to be an official provocation against the entire Muslim world. So that's not really like a debatable thing. That's just kind of like what he said, and whether or not that was, whether he was a team player or whether, you know, that was actually a legitimate thing. Those are some of the outlines of the motivations of why they would do that. Then let's just explain or outline the timeline of what happened, and then we can talk about some of the details of what's going on. So 8:46 a.m., the North Tower was struck by the first plane. 9:03 a.m., the South Tower was struck by the second plane. 9:59, the South Tower collapsed, and then 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. In addition to that,
Yeah, where's Building 7?
we have Building 7 at some indeterminate point.
23 minutes after it was reported.
Yeah, at some indeterminate point, some rubble from one of the towers fell and begun a series of fires that burned throughout the day. Because most of the water was being directed towards the two main towers and fighting the fires there. There was basically no water remaining for the sprinkler systems and the firefighters to try to keep this fire under bay. So it basically raged.
Using sprinkler systems?
Yeah.
What the heck was going to happen?
So it basically raged the entire day and until it finally fully collapsed at 5:20 and 52 seconds p.m. And the real big issue here is a few things. With Building 7, it was built in the 60s on top of a substation, and that posed some interesting building conundrums, and they had to work around that. So it wouldn't necessarily be the perfect building anyway. And then building codes at this point were put in place expecting that the safety systems would be operational. And some of the things we learned from an engineering perspective and safety standards perspective from these collapses is that we should have building codes so that if the sprinkler systems were not operational, if the fire protection systems and the insulation were
in this
not
battle station are not fully operational.
That's exactly right. Yeah, if so, basically, if the insulation and the firefighting systems were not in place, the building should withstand significant fire damage, and other things like that. That's kind of the general outline of what happened according to kind of the stats. You know, when the buildings actually fell, whatever the reasoning, when the first impacts occurred, and then the final collapses of each of the buildings. Also, I guess I should throw in there Pentagon. Some people say it's a missile. Some people say it's a plane. Whatever they say, the impact occurred at 9:37 a.m. And then there was a random crash in a field at 10:03 a.m.
My basic facts to counter your facts. The fact is,
Fake
in
news.
the history of high-rise buildings, the history of skyscrapers, there's only been 3 recorded incidences of skyscrapers collapsing due to natural causes or fires or anything, and that was the 3 buildings on 9/11. Sky rises are built to not fall. They're built to have minimal damage. They're built to withstand way more force than is actually put on them. Actually, the columns and the twin towers were designed to withstand. Each column was designed to withstand up to 2,000% of what they were actually holding. So they were actually designed to hold a ton more than what was actually put on them. Office fires do not cause sky rises to fall. That's just a fact. The towers were actually the Twin Towers. I don't know about Building 7. The Twin Towers were designed so you could cut away up to 25% of the columns on the first floor. That's not up 60 stories or whatever it was. They were designed 25% of the columns on the first floor were designed to be able to be cut away and still withstand up to 100-mile-an-hour winds and not fall down. So the fact that they took out up to 14% or 15% of the columns on like the 60th floor, and that caused the structure to completely collapse on itself. I don't see how that's possible. That doesn't seem like it would happen because of how these buildings were designed. Like I said, I don't know about Building 7. I haven't looked too into the design of that. But the official story actually in the 9/11 report is that it wasn't caused by, little effect from falling debris actually caused it to fall. It was indeed caused by the fires caused by falling debris.
That is correct.
So,
Yeah, this thing we're gonna jump fact to fact or
sure.
thing to thing here. Not sure if we're gonna stick to Nathan's agenda, but have any of you guys looked into like the war games that were going on that day, like the military?
they're basically reenacting exactly what was happening.
Yes, between 4 to 10 military exercises were scheduled for the day of September 11th. Some involving hijacking and commercial airliners. Because of this, a large number of fighters were moved to Canada and Alaska. It also created a major confusion in the system when the actual hijackings were reported. Like, there's tons of, you can listen to audio of people, like when it was announced that there was a plane headed this way or that way. Like, there are people saying, hey, can we get these goddamn simulations out of the air because these are screwing up everything. They kept getting these calls in. They'd be like, is this real or is this a simulation? And they're like, no, it's real. Look into it. Guys calling and saying, hey, this base, do you have anybody who can send people up? No, we don't. They're out doing this. This base, no. It was like 10 bases that they hit from like New York to like Ohio to all over the place. Where they're trying to find...
The nearest one was 150 miles away. That was the nearest one they could scramble jets from to get out to where these planes were actually being hijacked.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wouldn't you think that the U.S. would have their shit together? Like, it's like, we pay all these tax dollars for our defense, you know? It's like, when we actually need you guys, can you guys come in for something? Like, seriously, you can't even do this one thing.
There was no quick response system in place at this point, and all of this stuff had to be done manually, and that's one of the things that we have gleaned from this is now we have much faster response time and things like that. Sorry, just to cut in a little bit, Craig, going back to your building collapsing issue. Yeah, totally. I agree what you're saying. Like,
you can't fact find for 5 minutes and then jump back in on a former topic.
I can because I have my facts here, but I did not have the exact date written down here. So,
9/11.
Yeah, 9/11. Thank you, Brad. If you look, I want to go through a little bit like the official like story of what happened, the post analyzation, but in January of this year, actually, we have an example of a high-rise falling from just a fire, and that was in Tehran. And so, I mean, we do have, even though it's not very common, examples of skyscrapers and high-rises falling from fires.
Did the whole building fall? The
Yes,
entire building?
It did.
Did it fall down or did
Yes.
it collapse in on itself?
It did fall. And it
Did it fall
at the speed of
straight
gravity?
down?
Yeah, the speed of gravity.
at the speed of gravity.
Into its own flip.
Let's bring up a video here and watch. So there's a lot of smoke and crap, but it appears that it did fall inward on itself, and
Saw something
then
fall to the side there.
yeah, towards
I
the end,
watched the end of it.
it fell off to the side. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, one example because there are not very many, but yeah, let's walk through the official stories and then let's talk about the conspiracy side of why these are wrong. Because my perspective is bringing the balance in. My job was the fact gathering on the patriotic side of the story. So just
Balance to the
yeah,
books.
in the sake of a balanced discussion.
Both sides of the truth.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which somewhat government funded, but they finally released in October 2005 their report on 1 World Trade Center and 2 World Trade Center. And they found that in the initial impact, the fireproofing on the steel infrastructure was blown off by the planes that struck. And then if this had not occurred, the towers more than likely would not have actually sustained heavy damage.
Can I comment on that before you move on?
Feel free.
The way they proved that was they took a steel beam, coated in the fireproofing, and shot a shotgun at it multiple times. So you're telling me that a plane going through multiple steel beams has the speed and the force of shotgun pellets being shot directly out of a shotgun multiple times.
Well,
that is how they proved that it was blown off.
Well, let me
was with
ask
a
you
shotgun.
something, Craig, and this is a very personal question. Feel free not to answer this if you don't want to. Would you rather be shot by a shotgun or ran into by a plane?
I'm a still beam.
I don't want either.
One.
I prefer neither.
No,
but I'm
Jeff,
just saying.
All right, I rest my case. Thank you. Moving
The
on.
force of a shotgun directly into a beam is going to be a lot more powerful than a plane flying through multiple beams and then hitting the interior beams where this fireproofing supposedly was weakened or blown off, as they say. And
So would you
there's just no
rather them
possibility.
fly a
All that-
plane
all
into
that-
another building, Craig?
all
Would you
that
rather them shoot a
impact-
shotgun at a beam, or would you rather them pull down another building?
all the force
Hold
of
on,
that
another
plane,
My vote.
all that force of pull the building, all the force of that plane would have drastically decreased as it went through each and every column. By the time it got to those interior columns, it would not have had the energy to blow off that fireproofing. I've seen this fireproofing. It is not easy to scrape off, let alone blow multiple chunks off that's enough to burn an entire building and have it drop down.
Have you ever flown a plane into steel beams?
I have.
I find this
What did you
great
find?
because like a year ago, Craig was sending me debunking stuff on this.
All right.
Well, I told you, this just changed 6 months ago when I heard about Building 7.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So, moving on. Whether or not a plane is similar to a shotgun, that's, I guess, for a further in-depth analysis. Let's get Brad and Keaton on that. You guys, I want you to test this hypothesis.
Can I just be the first to say that jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams?
It might.
You are the first person to say that.
I just want to say,
Is
if
this
we're going to
a
have a
new thought?
9/11 conspiracy podcast, I just have to say it. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so then a 2007 produced study discusses that the heat from a typical office fire would actually have softened and weakened the exposed girders and columns, which would actually cause the floor to sag and drawing inward lateral force on the external beams, which would be, somewhat irregular.
Okay, so when they proved that the columns would sag, they sagged like 3 or 4 inches, and when they showed it in a computer simulation for this proof, for the 9/11 report, they showed that it sagged like 14 inches. So what they're showing and what actually happened in their demonstration is completely different.
All right. So you're talking about the girders horizontally, not columns. Okay, cool. And then,
right. You asked me to jump in.
I
You love the facts, Nathan.
Yeah,
You
I'm
just
not-
love the facts.
I'm not telling you not to. I'm just.
We'll get to the good stuff eventually. Hang in there,
This is
guys.
like the most methodical way of going through it because you have the
No, I get it.
official
Scientific
story
method,
and then
it works, right?
Yeah, because like the documentaries, like you said, one of the main criticisms is that they don't have anybody opposing them. So if we
Yeah,
want to be
sure.
fair and balanced, we need to address
You
it.
can say every single thing that they say, and we can oppose each one individually,
Yeah.
or we can say the things that we oppose, and you can defend what you don't actually believe.
Defend your honor.
But I'm not going to do that because as the patriotic position that I am holding, we don't respond to conspiracy theorists because it gives them.
Stop saying patriotic.
Yeah, I know
hate
it is
that
a
crap.
weird. It is a weird defense.
What
It
would
is not
you?
unpatriotic
Do
to
you think
say
the majority of Americans are conspiracists, or do you think they take the position of, you know what, terrorists got us?
I think the majority of Americans think that there's at least some foreknowledge.
I think it's generational. It might
Yeah.
be generational. Like our generation, we're
I
kind of
think-
like, okay, America.
Not so much. I think if you have any question at all, like, you don't have to believe everything that Daniel believes because he believes the craziest of crazy. I don't know about Keaton. He seems to go full-blown woke.
he's in
too,
my
but
camp.
I'm saying if you have a question about one part of the official report, the whole report should get reinvestigated.
Me and Keaton are sitting alone
Because
in the
that
corner
throws
with
the whole
tinfoil
thing out.
hats on right now.
Infowar hats.
Tinfoil hats.
Oh, tinfoil hats.
Oh yeah.
Evidently, you guys don't like my facts. I'm the only one who did any freaking work in this.
A little debate.
I like your facts.
I like having somebody have facts to debate versus. Well, I think.
Sure.
No, I think that.
Yeah, I like your facts, but I think that we got to keep it going at some point, and we got to get to some of the meat of the conspiracy stuff before you have the objection to conspiracy stuff. Because
I'm sorry, Dan. You asked me to do research, and I'm just really good at my
yeah,
job.
I know you're freaking ridiculous. You're ridiculous about it.
Ridiculous.
Do you think that Donald Trump is the truther?
No.
I think that's off topic.
No, I think he's not a truther.
Do we want to talk about 7 World Trade Center, Tower 7?
Oh, sure.
Seems like we keep bending back to that. So
Okay, so
why not?
official
Talk about
story.
7, Nathan. Give us the
Give us the
Facts.
facts.
All right, 47 stories. High,
Wow.
not low. High.
Oh, good fact.
All right.
I'm not.
Why
I'm
did it
no
go-
more their truther.
Yeah, why did it go down?
Yeah, I think I just disproved all the conspiracies.
I thought it was 46.
Yeah, and then again, interestingly, it was situated above a power substation, which caused the design constraints that made it such a weird building. Which I don't know why they did in the first place, but that's what it is. And it was actually located above like tons of diesel fuel, which the official report says did not contribute to the ultimate collapse of it. But it is interesting,
What
especially
was the diesel fuel doing there?
Yeah.
it runs. Yeah. Well,
Who puts diesel fuel in the bottom of a high rise?
Let's line this base with diesel.
Yeah,
We could light it with cement. Well, let's try diesel.
it was just
Makes a good
it was holding the
foundation.
building down. No, reportedly it's what fueled the generators in different systems of the substation.
How many blocks away was it?
It was on the plaza. It was
Super close.
Yeah, it was like not right.
Over a football field away. But
Yeah.
But it wasn't hit by a plane.
No. Building 7 wasn't
Supporting the
hit.
steel beams.
Really, Building 7 wasn't hit by anything that caused significant structural damage. Basically, just which caused a fire, and that's what happened.
So fire brought it down.
Yep. So it was damaged by debris that
Office fire.
fell from the north tower.
Copy your fire.
And yeah, so then the official NIST report, November 2008, was diesel fuel stored in the base levels did not play an important role, did not, give structural damage. The lack of water to fight the fire was one of the most important factors. The fire caused the floor beams near column 79 to expand and push a key girder off its seat, triggering floors 8 through 14 to collapse around column 79. So this is a little technical, but essentially what's going on with these girders is they were kind of like hanging out on top, like Lincoln log style, where you stick one on top of the other, except not interlacing. And the expansion of the metal because of the heat pushed one of them off the side, which caused the floors to collapse around this key column, which was
That's why
incidentally
they fell exactly the same way as the other two.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, no, actually, technically, yes, because this column 79 was basically the only column supporting this far end of the trapezoidal building.
Crap.
Yeah, and then
Would you build that? that
I
way?
know it's really
Okay.
whoever
Let
built
me,
this.
I'm not even going to debate you, but I'm going to say that I install fire alarms for a living. So I know for a fact that if a fire alarm, just one siren doesn't go off and somebody dies from that, my company goes out of business because they get sued the crap out of them.
Yeah.
So the fact that the sprinkler system didn't work and one column was holding this entire building up, the families that died there should be trillionaires now over the lawsuits that could come out of it.
Yeah, and this is you're totally right. This is the really a bad design, and they actually struggled getting someone to buy the lease for the building. That they struggled getting a tenant for it because they really weren't confident in this design. But so it is.
Okay, pause. Boop, boop. Building 7. It fell. Let's say it fell naturally from heat and poor design. Can anybody explain why it fell 27 minutes after they reported it falling and it's standing in the background? That's the whole thing. Like, all the facts, all the science and everything doesn't really matter. It all falls apart if...
And there weren't any deaths, right? There weren't any deaths from Building 7, or there were?
I don't have those numbers.
I don't think
okay,
there were.
I thought they evacuated everyone because
think
it was so long after. But yeah, Dan, I can give a little bit of insight into that. There were essentially 3 separate stages of the collapse of Building 7. The first one was this column 79, which was about a third of the building. So
I love your facts.
Yeah, I mean, I did my
love
job.
your facts.
Yeah.
So
I want to know where is the evidence of that, because there is no video out there that shows multiple stages of the collapse of this.
actually,
building.
there is at least a still image, if not part of a footage, because you have to remember,
This is
why
gonna be like
would
12
you?
episodes.
That's cool. Why would you be focusing on a building nearby the two major ones? So yeah, there was not a lot of footage, but there is an image that shows a really large gash vertically in the building that does show significant structural damage.
Did any other buildings fall? So was it just World Trade
was-
Center 1, 2, and 7?
Actually-
These three primarily fell. Some of the fuselage and landing gear from the planes landed in some of the nearby locations.
But no other buildings fell?
To my knowledge, no.
Just World Trade Center buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Just
We'll
want to
leave
make
it
sure.
at that. How could there be any
Other
debris
buildings
that
were
fell?
destroyed, but they were.
How could there be any debris that fell from the planes? Because the planes went from what I have seen in videos, they go straight into the World Trade Center buildings like hot knife through butter, and they're just gone.
Yeah.
How is there anything coming out of that?
So, planes are not specifically built to withstand impact damage. I mean, they're built to have the primary cabin remain as much as possible. The primary structural stability of a plane is that the main fuselage would remain intact as much as possible to preserve the passengers. The wings and all the other engines and everything else is who cares. So
That's not what the video shows. It shows it completely disappearing.
So yeah,
into the building.
for the first tower, the second tower, like you said, we didn't really see much of what's going on, and so
It hits the backside and explodes out the front side somehow.
so
Also, can we talk about, why weren't these buildings made out of whatever passports that we found? Why weren't these buildings made out of whatever these passports were made out of that we found in the wreckage?
Or the black box of the airplane.
yeah, the simple answer is it's way too cost prohibitive.
Yeah, paper. Paper
Yes.
is pretty expensive.
Yeah. Also, in my understanding, paper is fairly combustible, but evidently not.
Ooh, you're
Look at World
slowly
Trade
coming
Center
over to
7.
No, like
The whole
I
building
said,
fell because of burning paper.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, like I said, my arguments do not necessarily reflect my own personal views, but I like playing.
You're just here to make this suck.
Yeah, I like playing a difficult.
No, I love it.
perspective.
I love it.
No, we gotta have somebody who's saying, "Hey, it could be this,"
Yeah.
because otherwise we'd all be sitting around saying, "Oh, this is a bunch of crap."
Yeah. So after
Which is what we're getting to.
Yeah, after that primary collapse around that first column, that's the first stage of the collapse. Then the lateral support lacking pulled an inward pressure on the column 79, which eventually caused it to buckle, and then kind of like dominoes, a series of internal columns had additional pressure put on them, and then that was the second collapse. It was a series of internal columns that continued to collapse and progress east to west in the core of the building, which ultimately overloaded the perimeter, which buckled the floors from 7 to 17, and then the remaining portion of the building collapsed as a single unit. So there was a lot of internal collapsing. The exterior fell as a single unit, like what would be typical of a building destruction. And the fires burned out of control for 7 hours, which led to this ongoing kind of thing. So it was basically a 3-stage collapse, the final one being the exterior, which is what everyone saw. So yeah, the collapsing thing where you see the building fall, that in this perspective can be easily explained by the fact that there were 2 prior collapses that occurred that this person would be reporting on. So that's that.
Snore.
One thing I want to point out is
It's not sexy,
the
but that's
scientific
this.
fact that matter, energy, whatever, moves towards the path of least resistance. So, in my opinion, and many people's opinions, if a building were going to fall, rather than falling directly towards the resistance, it would fall away from the resistance, therefore causing it to do at least some form of a topple sideways, like even a slight deviation in the downward spiral that all 3 towers seem to have.
Yeah, and
dropped.
if you watch the footage, after the planes hit, supposedly, you can see explosions down the side of the building. Is that from them collapsing in on themselves? I mean,
But they say it's from the energy in the air blowing out from the floor above it, pushing down, pushing the.
but it looks like a
Air
controlled
outward.
demolition. Like it
could
looks
be,
exactly like
it looks
videos
exact-
of
if you-
controlled demolition.
If you play controlled demolition side by side with Tower 7 or any of the 3 towers, it's identical to a controlled demolition.
Yeah,
The only time I've ever seen, which I haven't watched too many buildings fall, but the only time I've ever seen buildings fall in that manner is controlled demolition. They're designed, controlled demolitions are designed to do exactly what that did. Drop straight down in its footprint, so that way there's minimal damage to the buildings around it.
And Building 7 doesn't fall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
what
I
do you
mean-
make of? I know we've all seen the slow-mo clips, the plane hitting the towers, and then there's those explosions that happen just before the plane hits the tower. Like, what do you make of those? Opponent, devil's
so the
advocate.
plane
I
would
could
go
tell you
in
what I make
easier.
of those, but you already know based on your question.
Sure.
Yeah,
That's so the plane can go in easier because I don't know if you have
Needs
you
a
ever looked out a
docking
plane
point.
window. Have you ever looked out a plane window and seen on the wing it says "Do not stand here"? The reason why is because your foot will go through the wing of that plane. I do not think plane wings were designed to go through the steel beams of the building the way they do in the one video that we've all seen where the plane cuts perfectly, like Dan said, like a knife through butter. The wings and everything went perfectly through the building. Plane wings are basically aluminum foil.
and if
They're
you
designed lightweight so the plane can lift.
Yeah, if you compare it with the impact, of course, we're talking 767 versus 757, but if you look at the impact on the Pentagon, it looked more like a fuselage rather than like these two did. Again, two
It almost
different.
looks like a plane didn't hit at all.
Yeah, again, two different planes, but like you're saying, most planes, I mean, most impacts, it's not cartoon, you know, like we don't see a perfect outline of Brad when he runs through a wall. You know,
Which he's
and-
done
Brad
many
doesn't
times.
run.
Brad doesn't run, but if he was
When he
thrown
runs
forcibly,
through a wall.
Yeah.
That's why he doesn't run very often.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, typically it would look more like what we saw at the Pentagon, where it looked more like just a smaller impact. Again, we're talking.
There was footage of the Pentagon. I'm kind of confused on that point.
There was closed.
No,
there was
no,
closed circuit,
there's not.
and it's intervallic imaging, so it's more like series of photographs. But yeah,
Footage
Yeah,
of
the
the
3
plane
still
hitting.
images of some missile-like objects heading into the Pentagon.
yeah. To be
Okay.
fair,
Or
it's
just an
really
explosion.
yeah. Essentially,
Aside-
most of what you see is the explosion itself. But
Oh, I was gonna say a side note to that is the funny thing about the camera is I've watched a couple different videos pro the official story, and everyone says makes a point to say there was only one camera that caught this footage at this time. They make a point to say that every video I've watched that's pro the official story.
You can see
they're
that
going
there's
through it.
clearly like
Yeah.
4 or 5 cameras on the outside. of the
well,
building.
yeah, and I thought there
and
was
they,
nearby.
They just point that out. They're like, as you can see, only one camera was. It's like,
yeah.
thanks for pointing that out again to make sure we were aware that none of the other 85 cameras on the building caught that.
Well, but here's the thing. I think there was one publicly released footage, which is what we are talking about currently. But I believe there was nearby even like gas station footage that had captured.
Why though?
there-
Why is there
Why do
only
we
one?
need the gas station to release their footage?
Yeah, exactly. There were a few other sources, from what I understand,
the
that
head of the United States military, like we can't just close
Yeah.
this down. You know,
Yeah,
we
why-
can't just have like complete footage.
Yeah.
Especially when
Like, let's
there's
reassure the American people.
yeah,
that
when there's
we're
so
not
many
fucked up.
questions and
Yeah.
we haven't shown anybody a plane, and we have at least 5 cameras on the outside of the building. We got to go to gas station footage.
Okay, 7-Eleven,
Yeah.
what do you
Keith.
got?
I want to get Keaton in on this. Keaton's holding back. I need to get Keaton in on
That's
this.
what I was gonna say.
yeah.
Keaton, chime in on the last 45 minutes.
I feel like he's muted.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
wondered that for a
It's
while.
okay, Keaton,
Like,
we
I don't
can't
know
hear
if
you,
his
buddy.
mic is working. Or
Keaton.
not. I feel like he's been trying to say stuff for a while.
We've just been talking over him. Oh yeah, we can't hear you.
Hey,
Keaton.
I'm gonna take a break. Let's take a break while he fixes that. I gotta pee.
I can read lips. Let me translate.
All right, he's saying I strongly believe
I can
that
only read lips in Arabic.
Donald K. Trump is our supreme ally
Donald
and
K.
leader.
Trump.
9/11 was an
9/11
outside job.
was an outside job. That's exactly what he's saying right now.
To be continued. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.